Hello, this is Richard Haight again. I've got another email question which I would like to share with a larger audience. And so let me pull that up. This is from Tyler. And he asks if I've heard of Jed McKenna and his method of unfolding, which he calls spiritual autolysis. Now, the word unfolding is my word, not Jed McKenna's word, but Tyler apparently sees a connection between the two. And he asked me if I could look it up and let me know what I think about it. And at the very least, I might find it interesting. And so I looked up spiritual autolysis, and what I found was that it was a methodology that Jed McKenna had discovered by what means I do not know, of looking at assumptions. So you take any belief or theory about life, anything that you believe to be true, anything that you believe to be ultimately true, and then you start asking questions about it in order to undermine or try to find its foundational truth. And so this would mean that for, I don't want to talk too much about what Jed McKenna specifically, his method, because I haven't read enough about it to know exactly what he does, but it's essentially using questioning to discover hidden biases and assumptions related to information and knowledge, things that we consider to be true, things that we have believed in. And I also, this process began rather spontaneously when I was rather young. I remember I used to go out on my property at night and lie down on the grass. We lived in a rural area in Southern California. And sometimes it could be there were so few lights out there that you could look up and see the stars so clearly. They felt so close, and I would just lie there and stare up at the night sky. And sometimes, for what reason I didn't know at the time, the sense of me just disappeared. And there was no longer a sense of separation between me and the totality. And I became very curious about this. I remember having the awareness of kind of, where am I? I felt like I was just everything. And so there was a strange realization that just maybe 10 or 15 or 20 minutes ago, some period of time before, there was the 100% belief or a felt sense of who and what I was, that now in this particular unconditioned state of consciousness, I didn't call it that at the time, of course, but in this total awareness, I could not find that anymore. So I started wondering, am I my body? But in this state, I really had no feeling of my body. And then it also occurred to me that, well, geez, if you were to cut off an arm, I'm still me. So I can't just be my body. I mean, my body can't be perfectly equal to me, but you could kind of prune away my body and me would still be. Okay, and am I my memories? Am I my thoughts? Well, in this particular state, memory sort of kind of faded away. So, and clearly there have been times where there was no thought. In this particular time, there was no thought of going on. There were certain periods of gaps in thought where there was no thought, no emotion. And clearly, I didn't cease to be. I mean, the sense of self that I normally thought I was certainly ceased to be, but there was still something going on, maybe for lack of a better term, a kind of meanness. Was the best I could describe it then. It was sort of a smell of me, I guess, that I couldn't quite put my finger on. But again and again, this happened throughout my life. And I began applying that questioning process to everything that I assumed to be true. And ultimately, what I found was that there was no way for me to prove my memories of my life to be true. Therefore, there was no way to prove that I was true, that I had ever existed, or that anybody I had ever met or any of my experiences were true or ever existed. nor was there a way for me to prove that my perception of the world or anything that I'd ever taught had been true or existed, could be proven to be true. And I realized that every experience quite literally could be just like a dream we had the night before. That there's no way for me to prove that this moment right now happening between us is real, is provable. I could ask somebody, are you objectively seeing me recording this video right now? And that person could say yes, but well, how do I know that person isn't just part of the dream? Well, I mean, logically speaking, they certainly could be. It would be the only reasonable conclusion. And once one realizes that that is the case, and once one has had sufficiently clear dreams or visions that are indistinguishable from this normal physical normalized perspective, then one realizes that the brain is entirely capable of creating, or at least perceiving, reality in such a way that one is not capable of distinguishing one reality from the other. And that then begs the question, it completely undermines, once that realization occurs, it completely undermines the idea that you know what reality is, and that the reality that you perceive is ultimately true. And I don't know to the extent that the method that Jed uses is exactly the same, but fundamentally, you're questioning biases and assumptions. And so for Tyler, what I would say is that there was a teacher that I'd had, a survival teacher, who used to describe, his name is Tom Brown, and he used to ask what he called the sacred question. Now, he applied this to a lot of things that I don't apply it to. To me, the most sacred type question is the essence of reality itself. It's this sort of undermining question, the question that undermines biases and assumptions. To me, this is a sacred question. The reason I describe it as a sacred question is that it ultimately could lead to the great unknowing. And the great unknowing is a very vitally important step in the awakening process. You're awakening from the dream. You're awakening from biases and assumptions and belief systems. And then from that awakening, you step out of pride, you step out of arrogance, because all information believed to be true and projected onto the world stems from the arrogance. It's an unconscious arrogance that you know. And it's very, very important to be able to step beyond that. So I would say that, again, I'm not exactly sure the methodology that Jed McKenna uses, but the fundamental concept of questioning biases and assumptions is absolutely vital. And this is something that I teach to my students. I have my own way of doing it, which may be somewhat distinct from what Jed is doing. Just from a little bit I read, it felt somewhat distinct from that. But at a fundamental level, there's an important commonality, and that is the movement beyond arrogance, the movement beyond assumption and bias, so that we can strip away all that and find a certain kind of pure intelligence that is beyond definition. Let's see. So I guess I would say that that might be something worth exploring. Yes, about wondering if you should read a certain book. I don't really want to name the title because I haven't read the book, and so I can't give an opinion about something I've not read. But furthermore, I don't like to give opinions on things, books and that sort of thing in general, because there's a lot more that we can get from a book than specifically what the book is teaching. Sometimes the most profound thing we can learn is what we don't want to be our spiritual path, the methodologies that we don't want to pursue. And so sometimes reading books that are just profoundly deep can help us give us insights into what we could say useful, positive insights. But then there are other books, or maybe even the same book, may have certain aspects of it that you realize, oh, this doesn't pass the test of bias and assumption. The spiritual autolysis process. There will be a lot of books that simply don't pass muster when going through that process. And so reading the book can actually help to kind of clarify the lines of thinking that one doesn't really want to spend much more time on because they're just very obviously misleading or time sinks. Now, it is important also, so in the martial arts training, for example, it's important never to shut out anything entirely completely. Always leave a little bit of openness, never deny completely. And this may be a difference between spiritual autolysis and what I'm teaching. It is just as false to say that is not true as it is to say this is true. So in my approach, I stay in what I describe as the nexus point. It is the point between extremes. So it is just as false to say what is not true as what is true. We can say, I cannot prove this to be true, but we should not say it's not absolutely not true. In the martial arts, I remember many times seeing techniques and movements and things like that and dismissing them, or even exploring them and then later dismissing them, only to advance to a higher level of awareness, sensitivity, understanding, awareness really, perception, where that same technique then became surprisingly useful. Or I don't want to describe it as technique, but for lack of a better term now, I could apply something that previously I had deemed non-applicable. And so we don't want to get caught up in identifying what is not true. The most we can say is this cannot be proven to be true. We can't say what is true, nor can we say absolutely what cannot be proven to be true. We can, like hard mathematics, you can say 2 + 2 does not equal 5. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that, but I mean more in terms of functions of the mind. For example, it's common to say that you can hear spiritual teachers say that thought and emotion are illusions; they're not true. Yes, but yes, that there's something to that. But we can also say that all of your experience, everything that you have ever valued through the life experience, whatever that is in thought and emotion. So to say that it is not true, that it is utterly an illusion, is to dismiss all that you have ever valued, to dismiss the experience of quote unquote physicality entirely. And that is also outside the nexus point. I can test this physically. I have certain ways of movement. When one is in what I describe as the nexus point or close to the nexus point, a high frequency of consciousness, certain physical movements under pressure can happen. The body being in that space integrates the body, connects everything up in such a way that you have this sort of spooky capacities that would otherwise not be had. I could have Arnold Schwarzenegger grab onto my fingers and absolutely not determined not to let me move, and I can pick him up on his tippy toes from my fingertips or from my wrists, or that sort of thing. And it's an effortless process because the body is utterly integrated when in what I described as the nexus point. But as soon as we start going into a state of denial of what is not true, that is again mind activity. That is again a kind of assumption and steps out of the nexus point. So with Jed McKenna, I don't know. I would have to actually view his body when going through this process of spiritual autolysis. Then I can perceive what's happening energetically, the kind of field around his body to see what's occurring there. And I would actually have to physically test to see to what degree of frequency it's bringing him to, or if it's actually taking him to the nexus point. But I can say that it certainly at least would help one to get beyond biases and assumptions, the positive bias and assumptions. But what I mean by that is what you believed to be true. just be careful not to go into the negative biases and assumptions by assuming that you have, by going into denials of things, labeling something as not true, labeling things as illusions or illusory. It's dangerous. I try to be very, very careful about the word truth and illusion, because the reality is somewhere. Reality is another dangerous word. The nexus point doesn't go into either of those. It's an aware state, a deeply aware state that doesn't deny nor does it affirm. I hope that helps. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. If you'd like to go into this further, Tyler, and actually have, public mentoring on this or other topics, so that would be fun. If you'd like to do private mentoring for a more long-term kind of thing, that would be good too. Possibly we can set up a session and potentially explore that possibility. As always, I've got a free audio course on my website. You can find that at www.richardhaight.net/audio course, or just at my website, www.richardhaight.net. You can find a link to it there. And as far as my mentoring and retreats and things like that, that's also available on the About page on my website. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this helped. Thank you.